Hello, hello. Welcome back. Great to have you back. And you arrive, as usual, at an excellent time, because it is time to dig back in to the Land of Stories, the Wishing Spell. Presently, we find ourselves at chapter 22. Pretty close to the end of the book. But, yeah, we'll see how long it takes. I don't know if we're going to make it to the end tonight, but we'll give it a shot. So, here we go. Snow White's Secret. The entire party traveled back to the Northern Kingdom in silence. The pattering of the horses' hooves on the road was the only sound the group made. The whole world seemed to have sighed with relief now that the evil queen was gone. Goldilocks was given permission to ride Porridge back into the kingdom, but her hands and feet were wrapped in chains. An annoyed expression was frozen on her face. Jack faithfully walked by her side the entire trip, with his hand on top of the manacles around hers. Red Riding Hood watched them from afar, looking away only when someone noticed her staring at the couple. She had never experienced so many emotions at once. She remained silent and still, praying that the hurt would go away. The twins were especially quiet during the journey. After everything they'd witnessed, it was hard to find words to express what they were thinking and feeling. Their thoughts were filled with the evil queen's story. They were haunted by images of her holding the body of the man who she loved her entire life before being consumed by the mirror. And while they were saddened by her tale, they were even more disappointed that the wishing spell was gone. They feared how long it would take for them to discover another way home. What obstacles and dangers would they have to endure when and if they found an alternative? What would they do in the meantime? Where would they live? "I'm so sorry, children," Froggy said as they went. "I feel completely responsible. Had I just let you use the wishing spell instead of persuading you to come with me, none of this would have happened." "It isn't your fault, Froggy," Alex said. "The wolves would have gotten to us sooner or later." "Actually, this whole thing is your fault," Connor said. "If you hadn't told us about the wishing spell, none of this would have happened in the first place. We would have never been chased by wolves, kidnapped by trolls, or targeted by the evil queen." Froggy lowered his head. The guilt was heavy, and it weighed him down. Alex looked like she was about to punch Connor in the face. "But," Connor said with a big cheesy smile, "you did save our lives, 3 times, so I think that makes up for it." Froggy chuckled. "You are more than welcome to live with me," he said. "I'll help you find another way home. I promise." The twins nodded and smiled at him. It was comforting to know they had a place to live, even if it was just a hole in the ground. They traveled for a day and a half before they finally reached Swan Lake and arrived at Snow White's palace. Red Riding Hood seemed intimidated by a palace so regal and large. "My castle is going to look just like this when it's finished," she told everyone around her, but no one seemed interested. The soldiers immediately took hold of Goldilocks and escorted her to the dungeon. "Wait just a minute. You can't just throw her into a captivity without a trial," Jack said. "For her sake, I hope she never gets a trial," a soldier said. "Go home, Jack," Goldilocks said. "With good behavior, they should let me out in a few decades." Jack followed them anyway, protesting the entire time, but even he knew there was nothing he could do. "Come with me," Sir Grant said to the twins. "We'll find the queen." The twins, Red and Froggy, followed the soldier into the palace. They went up the staircase to the 3rd floor and down the hall to the door of what must have been the real entrance into the storage chamber. Grant knocked on the door. "Your Majesty, it's Sir Grant." "Are you in there?" he said. "Yes, please come in," Snow White said from inside. They all followed Sir Grant inside. The room looked completely different. All the furniture had been uncovered and the paintings had been placed on the walls. It looked like an actual room again. "What are you two doing here?" Snow White asked. She was putting the portrait of the huntsman back on the wall. For the past couple of days, she had been restoring the room by herself. "Your Majesty," Sir Grant said, lowering his helmet, "we found your stepmother hiding in a castle in the northeast sleeping kingdom." "And?" Snow White asked, bracing herself for the news. "She's dead," Grant informed her. Snow White's face became paler, which the twins hadn't thought was possible. She sat down on the platform in the back of the room. She didn't cry, but anyone could tell it was difficult news to process. "How did it happen?" Snow White asked. Grant looked down at the twins. "I wasn't there, but they saw it happen." "She didn't die, per se," Alex said, trying to put it delicately. "The castle was falling apart, and her mirror, well, it fell on top of her and swallowed her like a bug. Boom! And then she disappeared," Connor said excitedly. "It was crazy. There was nothing left." Alex gave her brother a dirty look. "Well, not necessarily," she said. Alex reached into her bag and pulled out the heart of stone. Snow White gasped upon seeing it. Alex walked across the room and handed Snow White her stepmother's heart. "This was left behind," Alex said. "I think you should have it." Snow White looked down at the stone, and tears spilled out of her eyes. "Sir Grant, I'd like to be alone with the children," Snow White said. "Please arrange rooms for the others if they would like to stay," she said, nodding to Red and Froggy. "Why, thank you, Your Majesty," Froggy said, and bowed. That's very nice. Thank you," Red said. "Maybe just until my palace is done being rebuilt. I'm putting a room just like this one." Sir Grant ushered them out of the chamber before Red could finish. The twins were left alone with Snow White. She was very quiet for a few moments. All she could do was stare down at the stone. "I guess you didn't listen to my advice then," Snow White said. "We listened," Connor said. "We just ignored it." "Do you know what this is?" Snow White asked them, holding up the heart of stone. "Yes," Alex told her. "It's her heart. She told us about it, and about her life before she was, well, the Evil Queen." "It was one heck of a story, too," Connor said. "Did you know that guy in her magic mirror was actually her long-lost boyfriend?" "Yes, I did," Snow White said. "That's why I helped her escape." Both the twins gasped and shook their heads in disbelief. They couldn't believe they'd heard her correctly. "What?" Alex asked. "You helped her escape?" "No way," Connor said. "Yes," Snow White said. "She showed no remorse with her confession. I sat in her cell for hours and listened to her story. It broke my heart. So, in a final attempt to please her, I arranged for her and her mirror to be taken up the river and into the next kingdom so she could continue her work." The twins couldn't believe it. They wanted to ask so many questions, but only grunts and light stutters came out of their mouths. "All these years I wondered why she didn't love me, and then I finally understood. It was because she couldn't," Snow White said. "I thought a heart as broken as hers was punishment enough for their crimes against me." "Did she free him then?" "She did," Alex said. "But, unfortunately, it was too late. He died in her arms." Snow White let out a distressed sigh. "I see," she said. "But they were together," Connor said. "One last time." "So what happens now?" Alex asked. "Do we clear her name? Do we tell the world the truth about her?" "I'm afraid that's easier said than done," Snow White said. "I think the best thing we can do now to honor her memory is to live every day with the compassion and understanding no one ever gave her." The twins looked at each other and exchanged sad smiles. "I think what I've learned from all of this is that villains are mostly just people villainized by circumstance," Alex said. Snow White nodded, sincerely looking down at the heart. "I agree," Snow White said. "That's the tragic lesson we can learn from the Evil Queen." The dungeon was a miserable place, as Goldilocks was learning firsthand. Her cell was small and damp. The smell was horrible, and the light was scarce. Occasionally, a rat would try to enter her cell, and Goldilocks would look down at it meanly and intimidate it into running the other way. "Don't even think about it," she said multiple times to the rodents. It was just past midnight, and all was quiet in the dungeon. Goldilocks couldn't sleep in her first night of captivity. She knew this day had been bound to come, but as she sat on the hard floor, she couldn't help but feel cheated that it had come so soon. Suddenly, a pair of footsteps echoed through the dungeon as someone from the palace above made their way down the spiral staircase and past the rows of cells. A young woman in a long hooded cloak slowly made her way to Goldilocks' cell. Gross. Ew. Yuck, the woman said after each step. Goldilocks recognized the prissy voice. Hello, Red Riding Hood whispered awkwardly. What are you doing down here? Goldilocks asked. Have you come to personally escort me to my execution? Keep your voice down, Red said. The guards don't know I'm in here. What do you want? Goldilocks asked her. I've come to let you out, Red said. What? Goldilocks asked, completely shocked. Why? Because I've decided to make things right, Red said very haughtily. Go ahead then. Let me out, Goldilocks said, almost daring her. But she didn't get her hopes up. She knew there had to be a catch. I will, but first, I wrote you a letter, Red said, and pulled out a piece of parchment from inside her cloak. You want me to read your letter first? Goldilocks said, not even attempting to disguise the annoyance in her voice. Of course not. I know you probably can't read, Red said sincerely. Goldilocks raised her eyebrows. You are so lucky these bars are between us right now. That was just a joke. Lighten up, Goldie. I've been working on this all night, and I thought it was best if I came down here and read it to you myself, Red said. I'm listening, Goldilocks said, and crossed her arms. Red cleared her throat. Dear Goldilocks, Red began reading. I'm sorry I ruined your life. Wow, I feel better already after saying that part. Looking back on it, I know sending you that letter when we were kids wasn't the right thing to do. I never meant to force you into being a fugitive. I thought the bears would scratch you up or eat one of your arms at most. Is this letter supposed to make me want to kill you less? Goldilocks asked. Let me finish first, Red said. I've loved Jack for just as long as you have, but he has chosen to love a less attractive, less intelligent, and less wealthy girl instead. He loves you, not me, and this is the hardest thing I will ever have to realize. I hope that by freeing you from the dungeon tonight, you can forgive me, love. Your friend, Her Majesty the Great, Queen Red Riding Hood. Goldilocks had never been so annoyed in her entire life. It took you all night to write that? She asked. Yes, and I meant every word, Red said. What do you say? Am I forgiven? Are we even? Open the door first, Goldilocks said. She would have rather spent the rest of her life in the cell than spend another 5 minutes with Red Riding Hood. Red fussed with a pair of golden keys and eventually found the right one to unlock the cell door. Goldilocks stepped out of her cell, looked Red directly in her eye, and slapped her hard across the face. Ouch! Red yelled. There. Now we're even, Goldilocks said. I know I deserve that, Red said, holding her hand against the side of her face. Now, put this on before we get caught and both end up behind these bars. Red threw her cloak over Goldilocks and the two women hurried out of the dungeon. They crept through the halls of the palace and made their way past the front lawns. They walked through a forest for a little ways and came to Ugly Duckling Pond. Porridge was waiting for Goldilocks by the edge of the pond. At first, Goldilocks could not see, but behind the horse, impatiently waiting, was Jack. Goldilocks stopped dead in her tracks. What are you doing here? She asked him, although she already knew the answer. I did it, Jack. I told you I could, Red said with a big smile. I'm coming with you, Jack said. Jack, we've been through this. You can't come with me, especially now. I'll be wanted more than ever before they discover I'm missing, Goldilocks said. Every day without you is ruined, Jack said. I won't spend any more of my life wondering if the woman I love is dead or alive or rotting in some prison. I thought I lost you back at the castle, and I refuse to ever feel that way again. I'm coming with you, even if it means that I have to chase you on foot. Tears filled the eyes of both women for different reasons. Both of their hearts belonged to the same man. Red would have given everything she owned to have heard him say that to her. Are you really willing to spend every minute of every day running from the law for the rest of your life, just to be with me? Goldilocks said. I would give up anything to spend every minute of every day with you, Jack said. He hopped onto Porridge's back and reached his hand down to help her up. Goldilocks' head was filled with reasons and excuses not to let him do this. She wanted to convince him to stay and live his life. But this time, her heart wouldn't let her. She took Jack's hand and jumped up onto Porridge with him. Together they took the reins and charged into the night. By sunrise, they would be the most wanted fugitives in the world, but at least they were in each other's arms. "You're welcome. No need to thank me. I'll be fine," Red called out after them as they disappeared into the forests. "I'll be fine." Red fell to her knees and sobbed. Tears poured down her face, and her makeup ran with them. She had never cried this hard in my entire life. "That was a very noble thing you did," said a voice behind her. She turned and saw Froggy leaning down by the pond, collecting flies into a large glass jar. "How much longer until this feeling goes away?" Red asked. "I'm afraid traces of that feeling may be with you the rest of your life," Froggy said. "But it'll get better with time." "I thought helping her escape would help the pain, but only made it worse," Red said. Froggy leaned down beside her. "It doesn't matter how greatly you've been hurt, or how much you're hurting. It's what you do with the pain that counts," he said. "You could cry for years, and rightfully so, or you could choose to learn and grow from it. Take it from me. I spent years hiding in a hole, afraid to come out because of what people would think of me. But one day, I decided to leave, and I ended up saving lives." Red dried her tears on his coat. He hadn't offered it, but he didn't mind. "You're very smart for a frog," Red said with a big smile. "Perhaps now, with all of my dreams crushed, I can devote all that empty headspace and energy to my kingdom. I am queen after all." "That sounds like a wonderful idea," Froggy said. He offered his arm to her and helped the saddened queen to her feet. They escorted each other back to the palace. "What's your name, by the way?" Red asked him. "I never learned it." He hesitated. "Froggy," he said. "Just call me Froggy." All right, I think we're going to park it there. Yeah, park it there tonight. And next time will be the end of The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell. We'll start with chapter 23 next time, A Royal Invitation. But till then, call it a night. It's gotten a bit late. I've gotten a bit tired. So it's time for me to get some sleep. Good night.